everyone, Sai here. Thank you so much for joining me. This is my Craft Roulette process video for episode 160. And what I'm going to show you is how I created this card right here from nothing to something. So I'll show you how I drew it, my thought processes, right down to coloring it and then putting it all together. I have sped this up quite a bit, and so it won't take as long. So if you enjoy watching that type of process, I do welcome you and I hope you enjoy this. And if not, then I hope to catch you in the next videos, but definitely check it out if you just want to see bits and pieces of it. So let's get to it and I'll show you how it all came together. So like every project, we start with nothing. And this is a piece of Express It cardstock, which is alcohol friendly or alcohol marker friendly. And it is cut to an A2 size. I'm using just a basic mechanical pencil, nothing fancy. I believe it's just a Bic pencil, and just lightly drawing out a sketch that I had in my head. I've been playing this game recently called No Man's Sky for the PlayStation, and so this has kind of inspired me to create a space-themed card. Now, I don't know what made me think of this. I understand why I did a space theme, but what came to mind was there was a chair and there was an astronaut sitting on it and it was attached to a conveyor belt. I'm not sure what that means. And usually I create a story for my cards. If you ever go to the Craft Roulette Facebook group, whenever I submit a card, I usually think of a story on the fly and I add it to my post. So I actually didn't have a story when I created this. I just had a vision in my head where there was someone, an astronaut, attached to a chair, and it was zipping by on a conveyor belt. And the reason the chair is because the requirements in episode 160 was you needed to have a chair. So the parameters were a card of your choice or any design. It needed to be strawberry field colors. It needed to have a chair and it needed to have plaid or gingham style. Now that one I kind of stretched. I think my pattern is actually a grid, but I tried to color it as a gingham style, but I'll let you be the judge on that one. Should have been disqualified, who knows. But anyways, I had a lot of fun making this card. And so as I'm making this card, I have him sitting there and I'm drawing this astronaut in a chair. I'm thinking, well, what is it that it's doing and why is it on this conveyor belt? And I decided that he was shopping, essentially. And so the reason I was thinking shopping is because the color choice is strawberry fields. And so immediately I'm thinking, obviously, strawberries. And so that's what I was drawing on the teleprompt there. You can see just two little strawberries on the screen, and the astronaut is zipping by. I then decided to start filling in the screen here, or filling in the paper, sorry, and I thought a nice big planet would be pretty cool. And so I'm actually off screen, you can't see me, but I have a planet just on my monitor, and I'm using that as a reference on how to create just a doodle of a planet. So I'm adding some craters, and I'm just seeing how that works. And actually, it's not that hard. What you want to do is just add a couple circles and rings around it. And you also really want to make sure that you have those craters on the edge of the planet as well. So really make it look 3D as if it's a living thing. And now I'm just fine-tuning, working on my mountains, and I added another little man there. So my story is growing. So now that I have another little astronaut sitting there, I'm adding some more telescreens, and obviously that's more advertisements, which is what it's kind of getting to. I'm not sure if I thought of advertisements at the time. It was mainly just prompts. It was just telescreens. And then I'm just slowly working away. I'm just adding details, adding little craters to the ground to make it indicate that this is also a planet that's in space. I'm adding some crevices to the mountains and then adding some stars. And this is where I'm having a little fun. This is where it's like, well, what happens when they get to the end of this treadmill? Um, and I thought it'd be quite hilarious if at the very end, in the very far distance, maybe no one would even see it, there's an astronaut being projected off at the very end because there is no end to this treadmill. It just kind of just cuts off right at the top of the mountain. And so as easy as you think this would be for such a little doodle, I had a real hard time drawing that chair. It just wasn't looking right. But essentially what you want to kind of get the idea of is that you get to the end of the treadmill and the astronaut is flung off, and of course the chair is not attached to you anymore. It's been propelled off as well, and they're just kind of floating past and swinging in whichever way that is going to take you. That's my little Easter egg. I think it gets a little more noticeable when I actually color it with my markers. But right now, if you weren't watching the video, there may be something that was missed, and that is the type of humor that I have. It's really dry, I would say. It's not like it's busting a gut or like laughing hysterically. It's just very subtle. It's silly. It's just, it is my humor. Let's just put it that way. I don't know how to describe it. It's just a harmless little fun. And so now I'm continuing to add rocks, adding some little dimension to the card. For example, adding the rocks around the post. That's helping it give it a little more dimension. And this is all just doodling. Pretty much what I do is I just keep fine-tuning it, adding little details. For example, right now I'm adding a little bit of, it's like an alien language. It's just a bunch of symbols. But that's really to amplify that this is an advertisement so that the person is watching. I will go over this whole thing with my Copic friendly fine liners. I like these ones because when I'm erasing, it doesn't seem to affect the ink as much. I do have also the micron pens, but I find that when I erase, it does seem to make them a little not as, let's say, not as black, not as dark. So here we go. I'm just using, I think it's a 0.03. I'm just going over all the details. There will be a little bit of back and forth with my pencil and the highlighter, or the black liner, as I'm just seeing things that need to be tweaked, because once you put your black ink down, that's it. It's you're not going to be changing. You'll have to start over again. So what I decided I wanted to work on is just really making sure that those arms are really abnormally flinging backwards. I'm really trying to give the impression that this astronaut is going at Mach speeds. Like, this is ridiculously fast. And this is all learning for me as well. I'm not a drawer. I do doodle sometimes, but I don't actually draw. I don't actually take the time to sit and draw, which is one reason that I really enjoy Craft Roulette, is because sometimes when I just want to get creative and not rely on a stamp set, I like to just try to draw a scene or just an element on the card, at least. But I don't always have the time, so when I do, I like to try to at least try to draw. And so in this case, I'm learning how to show motion. It's not something that I do on a regular basis. So with those arms, I know it looks weird, but it's intended. It's intended. It's kind of like a cartoon style. Just the arms would never do that. I mean, your poor arms would be dislocated if they were to be able to flap like that in that direction. So here we go. I'm just continuing, just highlighting or outlining every single line. Not only do I do it with 0.3, I then go over the whole thing again with a 0.1, because when I was looking at this, I like a thicker line. And so I realized after this, I just didn't really care for it. And sometimes I don't know if I want a thicker line until I've already gone over it with a thinner one. So unfortunately, that's just what I had to do, but I did cut that all out of the video. So you'll notice when this is all done that when I come back, it's going to look thicker, and that's the reason. I did go over the whole thing. And there we go. I'm just going to erase everything, and then you kind of want, this is where I kind of notice that it's too thin of a line. I think these ones are better for like shading, like if you want to add some little shading to things, these fine ones are better, but there we go. And as you can see, it's quite darker and thicker. Now this is where I add my gingham pattern that is part of the random element or random parameter. And like I said earlier, that I believe this is more of a grid, but I tried to color it to make it look like it was gingham, but I'm really stretching on this one. So if it's not, I do apologize. So here we go. I'm just adding it to make it this treadmill have its pattern. And so far I've nailed most of the parameters. I'm choosing an A2 size card. I have a chair, and I have my gingham pattern. So the next thing to do is add my colors, and here I am using my alcohol markers, and I'm just playing with the different colors that I have, seeing which ones will be good for my strawberry field colors. So when I'm working on my cards, I really try to stick to these colors. So that's means I'm going to need reds and greens. Browns, blacks, grays, they're all already available. Like they're the neutrals, so you're allowed to use those. And so these other colors, I will try to make more prominent. So in this case, the red, green, I will add a little bit of yellow because I do think that the seeds are a bit yellowish. And here we go. So you'll see I've sped this up quite a bit. I think it's 6 times the speed, but you'll still get the gist of how I'm coloring. And it's very blotchy, and I did this purposely because it is a planet. So I'm trying to make it look blotchy. I don't want a smooth coat over this. So when you're working with alcohol markers, they will kind of smooth out, but they also will layer on top of each other. So if you go over a spot, it will come darker, especially if it's the same color. So if you're not fully covering the paper and then you go back over it, you will kind of get this textured effect. And you can kind of see it if you look closely, how it's kind of just blotchy. Now I'm going to work on my astronaut. This is tough. I'm still learning how to do white and gray to make it look nice. So usually what happens is I bring out too dark of colors, and then it's not white or gray anymore. It's just dark. So I'm just playing with some of these shades. I'm still not overly happy with my astronaut coloring, but it's a work in progress. For my little computer piece and belt, I am bringing in some red, black, and really dark red just to tie in that strawberry field theme. So even the black is going to be a reddish color. And here I am just trying to figure out how to create motion. So I'm just doodling on this scrap piece of paper, trying to figure out what's the best approach to make this look like they're going really fast, because I did draw some lines with the Copic or fine liner, but it's not really giving you that much of emotion. I really need that blurred line, and I've never done this before, so I was just practicing, and so I'm just doing the flicking motion, and I'm slowly adding color just to see how it looks. Very subtle, and wherever the color of that object is, that's what I'm going to stretch out. So that's why the helmet is gray, and then the chair is that brownish yellowish color. I think it's an orangey yellow, and I'm just really spreading it. This is why I also didn't color that side yet, because now I'm going to bring in my reds, but I'm going to do a very light color, and then I'm going to blend it into that darker coral red that I was using. So I'm just doing it in a little bit of layers, just slowly creeping in. I don't want to go too fast and too far, because then if you make a mistake, you can't undo it, but you can always creep closer. So I'm just grabbing different shades and I'm just slowly adding. I will probably go over it a little bit more once things start blending in, start spreading out, or however you want to say, smoothing out, then you start playing with it some more. So just adding to my helmet, adding a nice little reflection. I could have added some white gel pen to really make that white, but for now, I just left it like that. Those type of things actually I would do at the very end, because if you do it too early, you might smudge it when you're coloring. So because I needed to have some green for my strawberry field, I decided to make this planet this beautiful green. I think this looks really sharp. I think it contrasts so well with this planet. And as I get further into it, it just makes me even happier. I've now switched back to the planet, so that's the way I color, is I just keep moving. I don't work on one thing at a time, because I kind of want to make sure everything is looking good at this as I'm moving along. I don't want to focus on one thing and then realize that it didn't work with the rest of it. So if you start working here and there by adding my shading, for example, what I'm doing now, after I've added the planet, at least the base coat, you're kind of seeing how it's all coming together. If I didn't do that planet first, it's not a problem. You're not going to see what it looks like with the green, as you're adding more shading and colors to your rest of the card or the scene. I don't know if you can see my technique. It's very, very fast and sloppy. I know this is sped up very fast, but it's showcasing very well how I color. I don't think very much when I'm coloring. I find that I just start scribbling and I just don't stop. So sometimes I'll dab and sometimes I'll scribble, and you can just see that everywhere. Like especially at the top where it's red, I kind of just start scribbling, and all of a sudden I started doing a spackle, kind of like a dot, just dots everywhere. And then I tie it in with lighter and lighter, and then just scribbling where the shadows are of rocks. And all that can be blended in more, but at least this is creating a nice, organic, unpurposely placed line, if that makes sense. I mean, if you really were looking for realistic, you might have to be a little more careful. But this is more of cartoony, so I like this. I love the messy blending. At least for now. My style will definitely change with time as I grow and learn, but this is what I'm enjoying right now. Okay, so it obviously is another day. So as you can see, I zoomed in quite a bit. I didn't realize that, but I guess you can see it a little bit better. So now I'm working on the mountains, and to do this, I decided to just bring a really dark color, and I'm just creating little crevasses, little lines. And then I'm taking my shades lighter and lighter as I move along, but following those darker lines. And the hope is to kind of create highlights and... What's the opposite of highlight? Sorry, I kind of went blank there. But the darker sides of the... I am, because I don't want too much red, I am trying to play with different shades of red without being too much. So you see that I switched. I didn't mean to use that red because I'm already using it on the planet. And if you think about it, the planet is closer and the mountains are further away. So that red should not be that similar to the mountain, because the mountain is so much further away. So I'm trying to work with the darker reds, but I don't want it to be too different, if that makes sense. I, at this point, am running out of time. I had about an hour to submit this card. With Craft Roulette, if you are a Patreon, you do get a lot more time. Instead of submitting it, I believe, on is it Sunday at midnight, you get until Thursday. But that's about 10 o'clock my time on a Thursday. So I had about an hour, and so I'm really pushing this. That's why I didn't draw on the other telescreens, and I'm just messily doing the treadmill that's moving around. I'm not really focusing too much on it. So if I took my time, I think this would look a little more polished, but I'm really happy with this. And as you can see, I'm really bringing this green planet to life. I'm really loving this. Just adding ram dots. I'm not thinking. I'm not thinking at all. I'm just moving my hand. Even the shadows underneath all those craters, I did not plan that. I did not think about it. I just moved my hand mindlessly around and just added colors. Very subtle, very quick, moving. Just keep move. Even with this sky. Now the sky was scary because I'm going to be bringing in a black. So that really scared me. So what I decided to do was I was going to highlight everything that I did not want the black near. Because in the worst case, I can always just put the black over it and you would never know. But you can't do the opposite. So I want everything glowing. I want my planet glowing. I want the horizon glowing. I want the stars. And I want that little guy flying off his chair in the distance. I want him glowing. I want to be able to see those things. So here I'm playing with my shades, seeing how can I go from that reddish black to the yellow, the lightest shade of yellow. And so once again, this is rushed. I could have done a little bit better where I'm hugging the stars a little bit closer. You can see on the far right, I do a little bit of the hugging where I'm kind of closing it in with a later shade of the orangey yellow, but I could have done a little bit more. This is kind of blotchy and I could see room for improvement, but I just love this effect. I love the possibility that this is going to create for future cards. I really like this combination. And so what it's doing is just kind of creating that dark scene. It's filling it in, but it's not too much. And now I'm just filling in my rocks. I'm going to be using a darker red. I want to make sure that they don't match too closely to the planet because I want them to just really stand out as being separate from the Earth. And there we go. That's it. That was all the coloring. That was all the drawing and really fast pace. It actually took, in the recordings, almost 3 hours of constant footage. So I've knocked that down to about 23 minutes, and now I'm just adding some layers. So I added a white layer, a red layer, and then I'm going to put that on my card base. This type of card does not require sentiment. It is an art piece. It is just a picture that I want to show, and that's it. That is this card right here. I do hope you enjoyed that. I think that this one might go to someone in the Craft Roulette Patreon group because there is the card exchange. If you aren't familiar, like I said, with Craft Roulette, it is a paper crafting challenge show where you are given 4 parameters and you try to make a card out of it. It doesn't have to be a card, and it could be any paper craft, but it's to challenge you into creating something a lot more restricted to these 4 parameters. So with that, if you are a patron, there are a lot more benefits. You get a lot of content, and one of them is a card exchange. And so if I do find someone who's having a birthday that loves space, this one might end up going to them. So you can definitely add a nice little sentiment in there and a nice little message, but I will probably put a piece of paper in there so that it can be reused if the person so wishes. So I don't know who that's going to. It may not be for a while, but someone will be happily surprised, I hope. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me. I do hope that you enjoyed that. I hope that has created some inspiration. I think that it is fun to just try and draw. I have noticed a lot of crafters in Craft Roulette adding little elements and drawing little things here and there, especially if they don't have a stamp for it. I think that's the coolest thing ever, to just try something out of your own mind. I think that's great. So I hope this continues to inspire people. And until the next time, have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all later. Take care. Bye.